Hi kids! I wanted to record this video so that I could maybe answer some questions you have about To Kill a Mockingbird now that you've started reading it. At some point, I'll probably end up scheduling a live Zoom session, but for the time being, I thought you guys were kind of good on your own. So if I'm wrong, just let me know. But what I'm doing is I'm sharing my screen now so that you can see some of the notes that I took for you for To Kill a Mockingbird Chapter 1. And once we're done with the text, I will make sure I share this slideshow with you so that you can see the information and study for a final assessment. Okay, so in this chapter, you learned about Scout and you learned about Jem and Dill and Atticus. So this gives you a little bit of background on them. And obviously, Scout is the most important character. She's the main character in the narrator. She's a young girl. And so this story is a real coming of age story that tells us a lot about these characters as they start to grow up. And what's interesting about their family life is that Atticus, their father, goes by Atticus. They call him Atticus. I mean, he's their father, but they call him Atticus, which tells you a little bit about the formality of their relationship. Meanwhile, Calpurnia, who they call Cal, is their African American cook and servant, but she basically helps to raise the kids. As you learned in chapter 1, Scout's mom died, so she says Jem does miss her, but Scout didn't really know her, so she doesn't really miss her the way that Jem does. In the very beginning of the chapter, in chapter 1, it talks about the time that Jem broke his arm, and that's actually not revealed. It's not revealed how he broke his arm until later on in the book. So that's something to think about as you continue reading the story. We're not going to read the whole book because it's really long. So we're going to only read a few chapters at a time, and I'm going to make sure I provide you with summary links to link the chapters together. So we're actually going to read chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we're going to jump ahead to chapter, I think, 6, and then 10, and then 15. So we're going to keep moving our way through the text that way. The other most important character in the story so far is Boo Radley, whose name is Arthur, and that's their neighbor. And his house really sparks a lot of questions about what's going on because the people that live in the house are never outside of the house. So your journal entry was about that. So I asked you guys to respond to the passage about Boo Radley and his past, and I asked you about any legends that you have in your neighborhood. So I kind of alluded to the fact that people often have this, like in Home Alone, you saw the clip of the kids talking about Old Man Marley, and how would the kids in your neighborhood react to like a legendary house or a legend of the neighborhood. When I was growing up in East Greenwich, there was a house down the street, and that house had the best Halloween candy every year. They always gave out like king size Hershey bars and king size Reese's, and that was what I was excited about. But we didn't know who lived there, so we just called it the Castle House, and we weren't afraid of it because obviously they gave us good candy. But you can easily see how like kids might come up with a legend about their homes. So I'm gonna read through your responses later today, and then maybe tomorrow I'll post some of the things you guys said about the legends in your neighborhood. But certainly, Boo Radley's house served to be this real mysterious place for Scout, Jem, and Dill. When they were playing, they always talked about Boo Radley's house. So the passage that I posted is about Boo Radley's past, and we learn that he does something really not great to his father. He actually stabs his father in the leg with scissors. But when I talk about this in class, I describe how he does it. Like the passage tells us, if you look, nope, I don't think it's in this passage. It's just before this, actually. Basically, what he's doing is he's like clipping newspaper cuttings, and then his dad walks by and he just stabs him, and then he continues clipping newspaper cuttings. It's not a real normal reaction to his father walking by. It tells you that he might have some real anger towards his father for some reason, and we don't really know what that's about, but we do know that there is a strained relationship between Boo and his father after that day, obviously. And when his father dies, that's when Boo's older brother ends up being his caretaker and treating Boo in the same way that his father did. So Boo is a shut-in, which means he doesn't leave his house very often. And if he ever leaves his house, the kids don't ever see him. So there's definitely some mystery surrounding Boo Radley. And of course, the other thing I asked you in your journal entry is how would these young kids react to this home when they walk by it. So one of the things I want to point out about that is just that when they walk by this house, since there's this legend, they kind of dare each other, like, hey, I dare you to touch the house. Hey, I dare you to touch the house. So that's how the chapter ends. One of the kids goes up and runs and touches the house and, earns the respect of the other kids. So it again speaks to that legend of Boo Radley. So that was what the journal entry was about. Going back to my notes for the chapters, if we look at the rest of the chapter notes, the Radleys, like I said, have lived across the street for as long as Scout can remember. They shut their doors up on Sundays, which is interesting because Sundays were the days to meet and greet with the neighbors, and they didn't participate in that. And when Boo was young, he definitely was with the wrong crowd, and then was locked in his home by his father. So they had a strained relationship, and then later stabbed him. Also, there's this quote: from the day that Mr. Radley took Arthur home from the courthouse cellar where he was being kept for stabbing his dad, people said the house died. So as if things weren't suspect enough, the Radley home seemed to be like a place for just where dreams go to die, basically, because there was no life in the home. It didn't look like a home. It just felt like this cold place that was in the neighborhood, in the block. And so, like I said, at the end of the chapter, the kids try to make Boo come out. They don't really want him to come out. They just were playing a game that they thought was funny and interesting to I don't know, sort of tease Boo. But also at the end of the chapter, it says that one of the curtains in the house moved. So you have this suspicion that maybe Boo was actually watching the kids. So it's up to you to decide whether you think they would enjoy, or he would rather enjoy, the fact that the kids were playing around, or if he'd be angry about it. So that was the reading you had to do.